Okay, so as not to delay much longer, let's go ahead and we'll get started. We've got a lot of great topics to cover today. I would like to start off with a quick introduction by our co-chairs, Nick Mayhew and Wayne Fry.
Hello, everybody. Nick Mayhew, I'm the industry co-chair. I'd like to welcome everybody to this USHST webinar. COVID times are keeping us busy and keeping us alert. And one of the reasons that we are doing this today is because we normally have a face-to-face in August. Every 6 months or so, we try and get together, have an all-hands face-to-face. So we couldn't do that this year in August as we'd planned. So what we decided to do was to increase the length of the this and the next all hands meetings from 1 to 2 hours, so that we could offer some more information to you out there in the industry. So this one will last 2 hours, and the next one for your diary is the 18th of November, a 2-hour session. We have some great speakers today. We're going to be talking about training. We're going to be talking about updates on the HSEs. But we need you to help us get the word out there. I know we've got something over 120 people on the line right now, which is really great. But there are more people out there operating aircraft, operating helicopters. So we need your help to get the word out there. Tell your colleagues about the USHST, and let's drive these fatal accidents, the fatal accident rate down together. I'd like to just hand over to Wayne now for him to say a few words. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Nick, and thank you, everybody. You're right. The numbers here are pretty amazing, and we have a wonderful agenda today. I was just looking at the schedule again here a few minutes ago, and there's so much good information to be had here. And in our other session, we'll have, I think, an equivalent amount of good information. So thank you for showing up. And I cannot help but want to thank the folks at HAI and everybody at USHST for promoting this and getting this session going. And I will turn it over to them, because I know we have a lot to do. So thank you, folks. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Wayne and Nick. Appreciate your introductions. We'd like to start off with a quick polling question of the audience. So we'll go ahead and let's throw that first question up there if we can, please. Okay, question up there is, how often do you conduct unintended IMC training at your organizations? If you all can just go ahead and click on that. Just a few more seconds and then we'll calculate the answers.
Okay, we've got 75% people voting. If you would like to close it out there, that's a good response percentage.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Let's close that out and we'll see what kind of results we got.
All right, so there was just a brief summary. There were options were never. We had 33% giving us a never response. Quarterly was 15%, twice a year 23%, and once a year is 29%.
Okay, can you just say that one more time, Chris, if everyone could hear that?
Yeah, so from the top, 33% said they never conduct UIMC training, 29% conduct it once a year, 23% twice a year, and 15% said quarterly.
Okay, great. Good information there. Interesting. A large percentage. That 33 is I would say fairly high, and then even once a year at 29%. So more than 59%, or excuse me, 62% that either don't do it at all or only once a year. So that's pretty significant, I think. And fortunately, later on in the presentation, Terry Palmer we'll be talking about unintended IMC types of training tools that are available to you. So hopefully that helps you all, and it enables you to do it more frequently, certainly more than never, right? Okay, great. Well, next up, we've got some of our helicopter safety enhancements that we want to give you a quick update related to training. And first up, I'll be talking about this one. And this is related to HSE 116, and it's for improving make, model, and transition training. Hopefully all can see that up on your screens right now. Our focal for this helicopter safety enhancement, you can go to the next slide. There it is Raj Helwig. He recently has taken over as that focal and is currently in the transition of taking that over. But the goal of this helicopter safety enhancement was to improve make and model transition by ensuring familiarity and understanding of the new model specific equipment that you'd be flying. Again, these helicopter safety enhancements are designed, for those of you not familiar, as a result of the analysis that the USHST did past years about the relevant accidents, fatalities that occurred, and this was one of the compelling contributors to that. So Raj is now taking that over, of course, and trying to work towards creating that best practice document is the initiative that was determined to occur. Next slide. Some of the other actions that are associated with this particular helicopter safety enhancement was looking at the industry and reviewing some of the existing best practices and recognitions that are out there, and then starting to draft that standardization guideline, reviewing, of course, and then implementing that. So next slide. The current status is that they're still working on that first action, that first output of reviewing industry best practices. It's only about 25% complete, and the current challenge for that team is that they need additional support. So hopefully, some of you that are on this webinar could help volunteer. Certainly, if this topic interests you, to help support and keep moving this important helicopter safety enhancement forward. We know that operators do buy new equipment, and so that transition is critical. When you think about safety management systems and change management, certainly this qualifies in that process. And again, trying to mitigate any potential hazards or unintended consequences from that change process is important. So this is a critical one, I think, for industry, and if anyone could help out, we really appreciate that. And you can contact Raj on that next slide. I think he's got his email address down there at the bottom of the screen. Okay, that's all I've got for that update. A pretty quick one. Next up, we've got Dave DeJura. He's with Colorado HeliOps, and he's been working on helicopter safety enhancement 125, which is for the pre-flight risk assessment for student flights. So I'll transition over to Dave now.
Hey everybody, Dave DeJura here, Colorado HeliOps. Go back to the beginning of my presentation here. Focal point for HSE 125 pre-flight risk assessment for student flights. For those of you who were on in March, we did an update in March, so I'm going to try not to double up on that information. In March, we went over some of the guidance that we've developed, which we have not published yet. It's getting closer, but went over that in March, and so now going to go over some of the additional outreach and other strategies we've been working on. So make sure my slides are working here.
You need me to advance for you, Dave?
Yep, I'm not getting any slides advancing, so if you can click the next slide for me, please. Thanks. So our first output was to, similar to the last, to recognize, well, I guess a little bit different. We had to identify what information was out there on pre-flight risk assessment for student flights and what guidance they already exist. So previously, and I went over that update before in March, but we've been through all that there's a lot of gaps, but a big improvement. Here's some good news that Aviation Instructor's Handbook has been updated in 2020. It's not helicopter specific, of course, but they moved risk management and SRM, or single pilot resource management, to the first chapter of the book, which is a really positive change. It's got many of the same risk management strategies and tools that you've seen in other FAA documents, but it is catered a little bit more specific to instruction, and it does briefly describe the use of a FRAT, so that's a really positive shift in priorities in terms of how that's going to get taught, we hope. And there's still areas certainly where it could incorporate some more instruction-specific risk management techniques. It really doesn't talk much about instructor intervention or other important elements, but definitely a step in the right direction there, so that's great. In terms of, or you can go to the next slide for me, please. Planned outputs here. Output 1 was complete. That was to identify where the gaps were and what's out there. Output 2 is to develop the guidance itself, and I have written quite a bit, and we've been making progress there, but I'm setting some goals here to try to have that completed by November. Output 3 is to deliver that guidance to the FAA. Output 4 is distribution of guidance and information on this, and that's been ongoing. Put that at 40%, but I don't think that'll ever be complete. We're always going to be promoting these important concepts, I think, and I've been meeting with a lot of interested people to try to improve the distribution there. Next slide. Sorry about that. Give me a minute. Okay there, so updates here in terms of outreach. We've got a couple things that have been going on recently and continue to happen. We have had an HAI webinar, Training for Efficiency, talked a lot about risk assessment and training activities for student flights and otherwise. We referenced flight risk assessment tools and their use. I've got a FAST team webinar that's going out to 7 Western states on September 29th, which will go out in the FAST blast. So if you're signed up for that, you should find out about it. We'll be going over USHST general safety information, but also flight risk assessment for student and training flights as well, and general concepts associated with the HSE 125. And then we're going to be doing a rotor safety challenge at the Heli Expo. And so look forward to speaking on the topic again there. You can go next slide. Oh, there we go. We'll jump ahead quite a bit. So other updates here, we've consulted and provided guidance to multiple flight schools in the recent months as people are getting back going since the COVID-19 issues here. Been able to meet both online and in person with a variety of flight schools, talk about best practices for risk management, developing FRATs and flight risk assessment tools, risk management controls for instruction, incorporation of SMS into flight schools. And I think right now a lot of people are looking at how they can better implement those things. So that's a real positive thing. Also, coordinating with Randy Rolls to develop the guidance. I really look forward to having his expertise on the written guidance that we'll be distributing here. So that hopefully will help us push that out in the near term here. Talked about outreach already. So one of the big challenges, I think, in terms of the distribution of this material, or I should say the implementation of it, is that the risk assessment tool by itself, it, as a standalone product, has the challenges of both buy-in and in terms of student flights, the resource at flight schools might be there, but then students go out into a larger industry and may not have the same resources available, and that's something we found here. Students may use the resources we have available to them, and then they feel that perhaps they could use more structure as they leave to help continue the best practices. So what I'm describing here is a way that I hope to help implement some of the HSE 125 concepts. Look for feedback from everybody here as well to try to see how it might fit into a larger picture, and especially in terms of distribution, something that I think, in addition to the guidance, might promote the concept. So in terms of getting further buy-in from CFIs and line pilots and giving learners more resources, what we're doing internally here is to provide a personal SMS to our student learners, incorporating the full 4 pillars kind of in an SMS to include pre-flight risk assessment, and that hopefully gives a larger framework within that it can work in and increase buy-in rather than just having something that everybody has to fill out per se. And so how that hopefully will look here, kind of a pilot program we're putting out there, running with both our employees and our students right now, and hopefully with the interest in distributing it on a larger scale in the future. It includes in terms of the 4 pillars of SMS, kind of like a safety commitment or pledge, similar to a policy in an organization. But like Land and Live has a pledge to land and live, we think that a pledge to do your own safety pledge is an important thing, and it can also incorporate a pre-flight risk assessment to say, yeah, I'm going to take the action to make sure my flights have that step before I take off. And then also in there, written personal minimums, which everybody agrees is a good practice. Personal minimums and a pre-flight risk assessment go hand in hand. The safety risk management tools would be to provide a framework and template potentially for a FRAT or a flight risk assessment tool in this whole resource, and any other personal strategies for risk management that can be developed or controlled, and to place and record an area basically just like an SMS would be, but to record any identified hazards for the identification of trends. So if you learn something on a flight, if the student or anybody who's using this tool identifies something that they feel would be worthy of revisiting at a later time, then they can write those down in that area, revisit them on a regular basis for recognition and currency, essentially. Professional development takes the place of an organization's safety promotion, a plan and goals for ongoing education and professional development. This is something I think Robinson incorporated in their recent flight review guidance. And I think essentially that same thing, if you have a pre-flight risk assessment tool, then it fits better in this larger framework to increase the buy-in and use of it. And lastly, same thing, safety assurance is a timeline to revisit personal minimums and the flight risk assessment tool's effectiveness. If that's written down, there's a lot better chance that the flight risk assessment tool is actually working. Did it keep you out of trouble? You go back and look at it on a regular basis. Are there any trends? Are we seeing really high risk operations that need to be addressed? And so hopefully, again, this framework will provide a little more context. We're developing the framework internally now and hope to see, get some feedback and see how effective it is with our employees and students to see if we can provide something on a larger scale. Go into the next slide. Not getting the next slide here, Chris, can you help me out? So just to summarizing that hopefully we'll start with private training, and we'll see how it works in terms of introducing SMS concepts and pre-flight risk assessment. The goal would be that the resource is available from job to job throughout a career, so it doesn't tie to a specific organization. Therefore, when you go to a place with less structure, you have a system that works for you and you can utilize it. And you also have trends tracking that would be personal rather than organizational, so you can keep an eye on your own issues. We're, like I said, already talking about testing it for practicality. We want it to be small and usable, just a personal tool where you basically keep some personal records and resources available, and hope to distribute it in the association with this HST in the long term. So that summarizes the ongoings for the HST 125. This is my contact information, david.desura@gmail.com. I'm happy to entertain any questions or comments or suggestions on anything I spoke about here. And we definitely appreciate help right now. We've got a couple people that that I've been coordinating with on this effort, but if you want to join the effort, then we can definitely loop you into all the materials and try to, I would appreciate anybody's feedback on the development of what we've got going on here. Thanks.
Great, Dave. I appreciate that. Nice job. Obviously, a very important component to any risk management process for any type of and size of operator is that pre-flight risk assessment tool, especially in the training environment, which you well know is very demanding. I'm glad that the Aviation Instructor's Handbook at least mentions the pre-flight risk assessment tool, and then certainly encourage folks to participate in your September 29th FAST team webinar. For folks that want to ask questions, there is a question section on that control panel, GoToWebinar control panel, where you could put that in. We just have a couple minutes to maybe throw a question out there. Another important element, Dave, I think is great, is the personal SMS, right? Especially for the small operators, they need to be able to create their own personal minimums, requirements, standards. You may not look like a formalized SMS process, but when we talk about risk management at the small operator level, that's a great concept. Whether you're using the PAVE model, things like that. IM Safe checklist is a very good pre-flight risk assessment tool. It's really important. Let's see. We've got one question. We'll get Dave's email address put into the GoToMeeting notice. It was up on the screen there, and it'll be available in the handouts. If we can, maybe Chris, can you go ahead and put up Dave's email address one more time? There it is, david.dzura@gmail.com. Any other questions? Okay, I think I just put it out there for everybody. Great, thanks again. And now let's transition over to our next speaker. It'll be Jill Browning, and she'll be talking, she's from Sikorsky Aircraft, and she'll be talking about Helicopter Safety Enhancement 127 Alpha, which addresses training for recognition and recovery of spatial disorientation. So Jill, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks, Chris. First of all, let me say thanks to the folks who did show up in March. We briefed as well, and got a lot of interested volunteers, and our team has grown. I think I've got the list up here. It's not switching. Can you advance the slide? There we go. So our team members have grown from a team of one to several, and a lot of folks with a lot of great background for us. So we've been very fortunate to sort of do a lot of work, a lot of heavy lifting by a few of these folks, especially got us pretty much back on track. So I'm really happy to say that we're making great progress, meeting regularly, still looking for some help though, and I'll give you an idea where we need some help. One of the things we did, just going through what the ask was for our particular HSC, was it was trying to focus on recognition of spatial DN recovery to controlled flight. And some of the research we did really identified that actually avoiding it altogether was your best bet, because once you get into true spatial disorientation, your likelihood to be able to recover is diminished. So we've sort of revised our mission statement a bit to try to set up our training to identify different ways to really avoid inadvertent IMC or unintentional IMC, and present the dangers and the challenges of getting into spatial D and then actually trying to safely recover, to sort of discourage folks from even doing it. And we've put together a training package that will discuss a lot about the aeromedical side, the visual and vestibular systems, just as a basic understanding of what's happening inside your brain when you actually encounter spatial disorientation. We talk about weather, flight planning, and route decision points, and then different options for just saying no and avoiding it altogether, and then a couple of techniques that are available for recovery when absolutely necessary. So the difference, I guess, in what the original ask was and what our team has sort of pivoted to focus on is avoidance versus relying on a one recovery technique to actually get out of it. Let me see, it's not advancing. There we go. So as far as our status for our outputs, we've completed output 1, which was a product review, and then we conducted a survey to get a lot of feedback from industry and operators, and we appreciate the folks who actually participated in that, because it really did inform the way we moved forward. What we did find was that there's really no, it does not discriminate. it didn't matter what platform you were on, what industry you were in, or even your experience level, pretty much everybody, or at least a large portion of the demographic indicated that everybody's encountered it at some point. So there's no safe place to be necessarily. And while there are a lot of training solutions within individual schools and individual operators, there's no real universal decision or universal solution provided. So we definitely think there's an opportunity for us to put together a comprehensive training package that gives people more likelihood of success if they, for avoiding it or if they encounter it. So on our output 2, which is actually to develop the content and define these scenarios, we're quite close on putting out a white paper that has the training content, all the information that we think needs to be discussed and delivered from a ground training standpoint. The simulator and aircraft scenarios we're working on now to determine the best opportunities depending on the platform or the medium that you have access to. Our big ask and my big, I guess, plea to the group is that while we've got a lot of content experts and we spend a lot of time putting together, exactly what we think this needs to contain, we don't have anybody in our group who's really versed in training delivery. So we think that it needs to be multiple solutions. So we're looking for, web-based application or web-based presentation, an app-based medium, and then also maybe even videos. So since we're limited on resources and we can't necessarily go externally to a training developer, we're hoping that there's a partnership we can sort of engage with someone, maybe in an academic institution who wants to do some kind of senior project, or maybe somebody in the FAA side who puts together some of the fast training. Like I said, we're not limiting it to just the computer-based training module. We'd like to look at different ways that we could deliver the same content to try to reach as many people as possible. So to the community out there, I say if you've got an interest in this or can think of a resource that might be beneficial, if you would forward that to us, we would greatly appreciate it, because we are wrapping up the content piece and we really want to start that process with somebody to figure out how to put these solutions together. On safety enhancement 3, that's basically distributing it to the industry and tracking use of it. So we think this is going to be a pretty easy lift just because we've got so much access. There are going to be some folks, like always, that we have a hard time reaching out to, especially the personal private group. But I think we're getting better at reaching them, and it's going to be a little bit of grassroots effort for that piece. But generally, we've got folks positioned in different areas of the industry that I think we can really leverage to get this stuff out into the system. One thing that did come up that I wanted to bring up to this group was, we're talking specifically about training we can provide, but when we look at FAA regulations, it looks like there's a couple of places where we might be able to have a conversation at least about why the topic of spatial disorientation isn't even in flight reviews and why there's no instrument training in the PPL. So I think there's opportunities where there might be, other things we can do besides just introducing training products to try to drive the industry to do some things that could actually put people in a better position to avoid this stuff. So summary, I guess I'd say overall, we got like a rock star team now. And because of that, we've moved this HSE, which was sort of the big, the big anchor in the whole thing, back on schedule. We've got the white paper about to come out, and we're looking very forward to moving from the ground training piece and using that to inform what we're going to do for the simulator and aircraft scenarios, which we've started putting together. Our biggest ask, again, is to try to find some help with converting that content into a deliverable product through multiple media. And then we'll look to distribute that content through, through all our different connection points, and we'll rely on a lot of you to help us with that. We do have, we have signed up also for a rotor safety topic in the upcoming meeting, so hopefully we'll get even more information out then. And we hope that, depending on how much, how much cooperation and collaboration happens between now and the end of the year, we can see where those training packages actually are. But we are confident that at least the content will certainly be ready to go by the end of the year, and probably sooner. So if you have any interest, or certainly if you know somebody who might be able to help us out with that piece, I greatly appreciate any connection you can make. I mean, that's how I got the team I got, is just through these kind of presentations and people who knew people who might be interested, and it's been fantastic. So I'm going to ask again and see if we can continue to move, down the field with this one. So happy to take your questions, and appreciate anybody reaching out with that information. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Jill. Yeah, we've got any questions that are out there, please go ahead and submit those. You can see Jill's email address up there. Really liked the progress you all are doing, Jill. That's great. You've got some participation there. Certainly more is always better. So please, for anyone else like the other helicopter safety enhancements, please volunteer. I really like your point about the no pun intended point, en route decision point. I think that's a really great tool, especially for the small operators, which, again, that personal private audience that you're trying to reach is really important as well. Easy tool that they can use to help, yeah, to your point, not get themselves into situations like unintended IMC and so forth. So thanks for bringing that up. And the inclusion in the flight reviews, that definitely is important as well, right? We need to be able to evaluate performance, but we also need to practice, right? We already saw from that polling question that, at least on the unintended IMC, it's not happening as often as it probably needs to in industry. Now, I don't see any questions right now from our audience, so Chris, why don't we go ahead and do the next polling question? And thanks again, Jill. Do you use a pre-flight risk assessment tool? Yes, no. Go ahead and select. Give it a few seconds for that.
It looks like we're holding about 66%, 68, 70.
Okay.
Let's close it out right there, and I can share this. I didn't realize we had that capability. So there you go.
Great. Yeah. So great. A vast majority are using some type of pre-flight risk assessment tool, whether that's for actual flights, but also keep in mind, you can use the same methodology on the maintenance side as well for your maintenance technicians that are going to be doing work that particular day or particular type of job. Again, you can use that same methodology for them as well. So that's good. That's good that it's being used. Hopefully it's effective. Again, the whole idea around the pre-flight risk assessment tool is to build engagement and awareness around what the particular flight that you're going to be conducting, what risks might be involved. So great. All right, so next up, I'd like to transition over to our next topic of unintended IMC. We've got a great speaker, Terry Palmer. Many of y'all know her from industry. She chairs the HAI's training working group right now, and among other many hats that she wears in our industry in supporting USHST and other areas. So I'm going to turn it over to Terry and let her start. Thanks again, Terry.
Hi, everybody. I want to introduce you to some of the things that the HAI training work group is doing. And I think some of this will help Jill there in what she was just looking for. The HAI training work group took on several ideas. And one of them was, of course, the inadvertent IMC. So what we decided to start with was come up with a new definition of VMC, something that, you know, something more than, hey, honestly, I'm clear of clouds, you know, one of those deals. So the team came up with a new definition for VMC and then VFR best practices. Now, we're not saying, you know, for the FAA to go in and change their definition. What we're saying is this is a best practice, and this is what HAI wants to present as a best practice. Now, everything that I tell you right now is what the working group is working on. However, it all has to be approved by the board before it's actually an HAI best practice. So we're still in the process of getting all that done. So none of this has been actually approved yet. But we developed a definition of VMC and then a VFR best practice. And just to give you the simple explanation of what we're saying is, if you can do your pre-flight risk assessment and check your weather and do all that and say, you know what, I guarantee I can stay VMC and I'm going. If you can't guarantee that you can stay VMC, then it's time to look at other options and how, if necessary, you can transition into IFR. So that's basically what it is. If I can stay VMC, I'm going to do it. If I can't, what are my plans to do something else? So if they get into an inadvertent IMC, they have an option. So that was the first portion. We finished the definition and came out with the best practice, which is now at the board now for review. The second portion of this is to come up with double IMC courses. And so the committee is currently working on that. They're going to have, when completed, a computer-based course that HAI can place on their website for people to access. Then, in addition to a computer-based course, which is the ground school portion, we will come up with simulator training scenarios that can be given out to all the training providers or operators that are using simulators. So we're going to do that. Then we're also going to come up with aircraft training scenarios for those that can't use a simulator or don't have access to that option, or to do it on a quarterly basis or more often when they're not going to be in the simulator, but maybe once or twice a year, so they have the option to do this in the aircraft as well. And we're looking at doing these aircraft training scenarios with foggles, with a hood, and with some of those new electronic devices that simulate inadvertent IMC, but electronically. So the electronic hood, so to speak. So we're looking at doing all of those, and those courses will all be available. We have a very aggressive timeline to get as much of this done before Heli Expo as possible. And the working group has been working very hard on this. We're also putting an international component into it and taking into consideration all that's happening in the different areas on how they handle this problem. And then the last course that we're looking at is understanding decision making and double IMC for the customer, for the celebrity, for the person that is renting the aircraft and the pilot, as to not put the pressure on the pilot to go when they shouldn't be going. So we're actually looking at a course to provide for that. And this course would be available on HAI's website, but would also be available for operators to show to their customers, where the customer doesn't have to go to HAI, but you know, somebody can show to the customers to take less pressure off of them. So we put a major focus on the working group. On our pilot side, we're putting a major focus on inadvertent IMC. This also supports the safety committees or safety working groups project, where they are putting together a video on 58 Seconds to Live, which is also on inadvertent IMC. So we're all supporting each other and bringing these products together with HAI in full support of USHST. So maybe some of this fits in with what Jill was doing. The other side of what the working group is doing, the training working group, is on the maintenance side. There's been a huge lack of training resources on the maintenance side. So we're actually working with several other groups to do a maintenance training outreach. There will be a maintenance safety symposium called Troubleshooting Technology on September 23rd. It's a virtual meeting. I'm hosting it live from Airbus helicopters. It's totally free. And it's going to be a series of speakers talking about how maintenance plays a factor in accidents and how, what kind of training resources do we need. They are no longer working on just the plain old helicopter that they've always worked on. Now there is so much technology involved. How are they keeping up with that? What training resources do they need? What we hope to get out of this project is to find out from the field what training resources are needed and get that information to the people that need it. So HAI will use that to help build training resources for maintenance. I've also partnered with BAMA, and in fact, they are looking at taking those resources to their members, member organizations, which is General Aviation Manufacturers Association, taking it to some of the manufacturers and saying, hey, this is what your customers need. So we're basically looking to see what maintenance training is needed out there. So that's the next project we're working on. Then what we're going to be doing for training events, the maintenance safety symposiums, we're looking to do 3 to 4 a year. At Heli Expo, we are hosting, as the training working group, we're hosting a town hall meeting. It's going to focus, number one, it's going to be a 2-hour meeting. The first hour is going to be focused on IMC initiatives. What are the training courses out there? What access do you have to resources to train for IMC? And this matches entirely with what USHSD is doing. We're going to be doing the second hour on maintenance outreach with the last little bit on what are the UAS training needs for both pilots and maintenance. So we're looking basically on what are the training needs and finding the resources to try to get that done. Of course, Heli Expo is also going to have the Rotor Safety Challenge courses, and there's several of those that are on inadvertent IMC this year. And then HAI is developing web-based training. They're doing some of it with the training work group. They're doing some of it on their own, and they're doing some of it with outside providers that are helping partner with HAI to get some of that training done. And then there's other organizations that are doing it too. ASPA, which is the former ALEA, they're doing a whole lot on inadvertent IMC. Brian Smith is doing a lot of those type courses. In fact, I do believe he's doing one on a rotor safety challenge at Heli Expo. But there's some excellent material in that. And then there's a lot of stuff coming out in articles on the web and in social media. And one of our projects with the working group, or one of my personal projects, is to get as much of that information together and see what's useful. So for the training working group, I take all that information that I can find, and any courses that are given or donated or just made available, we're putting them into a Dropbox account where members of the working group can try to take the best information out of each one to develop some of this course material. And we have a great group working on it. So basically, that's what we're doing as far as training events. I did want to cover a quick little simulator update. Simulators are being used extensively now in rotorcraft. It's really exciting. If we look 10 years ago, I mean, the industry couldn't spell simulator, and now they're so much in use. All the OEMs are using them. Training providers, more and more, are getting involved in the helicopter side. Flight schools are putting in simulators, and operators are buying their own, and they're setting up training departments and training centers. They're even opening up some of their training to some of their neighbors and other other operators that don't have use of a simulator. So the simulators are being shared, and this is really exciting. And all of the simulator manufacturers, I keep up with all of them, there's lots of new sims coming. And what was real exciting to see is that most of the OEMs now are having their simulator come out at the same time their new aircraft are introduced, which never happened in the past except for a very small group. That never happened before. So the new sims are coming out as the new aircraft are coming out. And as the aircraft are adding all this new technology, simulation is even more important just to learn the technology in the aircraft. So it's really exciting to see where all of that is going. So we will continue our projects, and we are available to help out anyone out there that needs help when they say, you know, hey, we need resources for a certain type of training, or, you know, when is something going to happen in this area of training? Please let us know, because that's what we're focusing on. What does the industry need and how can we do it? So there's my contact information, and please reach out to me anytime you have any ideas or anything I can do to help find the resources that you need.
Great, Terry. Thank you so much. Appreciate everything that you're doing and the working group's doing right now for the industry. And I'm glad you brought up the simulators, the new simulators and flight training devices that are now becoming available. I think, you know, that's an area certainly in our industry that can help with any amount of training. Your great point about the technology that these new aircraft have capabilities, and actually just learning that, right? You know, that can be a challenge, just learning the avionics package or the flight management system and so forth. So that can be an important element to any operator's training program, large or small, can be simplistic and scalable for them. What kind of things do you think help folks, especially the small operator, private owners, personal owners, that for practicing unintended IMC, you know, when they're by themselves, you know, what tips could you give them?
To train for inadvertent IMC, first of all, they need to first go through the process of the decision making. I mean, the safety culture and the decision making has to come first. Okay, and one of the goals that we tried to come up with the working group was to say, okay, this is a real definition of VMC, and can I really stay in it? That's the first thing. They've got to figure that out. Now, a lot of times they're going to say, yeah, I can make it, you know. Okay, fine, but what is your plan? So to help them develop a plan, what they can do if something should happen and they misjudged and they can't stay in it, that's real important. I think training if they have to train in an aircraft, then they need to train with a safety pilot and either one of those devices that helps, you know, change the visibility or something really good. Staying instrument current is absolutely critical, and that's going to take practice either in a sim or in an aircraft. And it doesn't have to be a full level D simulator. It can be an FTD, it can be an AATD, it can be Microsoft Simulator if they just want to practice. You know, it's those procedures that they need to practice. So anything along those lines that they can do is going to help. And especially if they're not doing a lot of flying because of the current environment, then they need to be practicing.
Yeah, that's great. Great input. And certainly I can see how those ideas and items you discussed in your presentation tie very closely to the helicopter safety enhancement that Jill and her team are working on as well. And I think Jill had some pictures of some devices, some headwear, you know, for use in unintended IMC training. Certainly, you know, the personal private pilot shouldn't be wearing that by themselves.
No.
They need to have someone with them, obviously, in the aircraft. But that's why, again, going back to your point about the flight training devices or even the simulators, that software that they can load on their laptops or the computers can be very, very helpful as well. So good stuff there. Any last minute items you want to pass out there? Well, and also for the audience, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask Terry, please do so at this time.
Yes, and please, reach out to me if you have any ideas or questions. And if you're coming to Heli Expo, please come to the training town hall, because not only are we going to be presenting what we've done, but we're looking for input. We are constantly looking for input. What does the industry need? What training resources are you looking for? Because we're going to go out and we're going to find them.
Yeah, that's great. I know a lot of people are very creative and smart with how they conduct their operations, and so those ideas are good. So yeah, please send those ideas in to Terry in the working group, or Jill and her team for the helicopter safety enhancement, or Dave Jazira and Raj, on those training methodologies that can be helpful. That's really important. I haven't seen any questions come in. Anybody out there have anything for us? If not, we are ahead of schedule, and so appreciate the speakers being timely. But we'll go ahead, and if there's no questions for Terry specifically, which I don't see anything coming in right now, we can go ahead and we'll put up our next polling question and take maybe a 3-minute break before our next presentation from Lead Roscop. So there's that question for you. Does your operation use simulators or flight training devices to help provide training? So on that question, about 65% of the attendees have voted, so we'll keep allowing that to continue.
Very briefly, this is Chris just chiming in to join you, Chris. For those who haven't found the question panel, if you look to your panel off to the side, one of the little tabs that you might see should prompt you for questions. You can open that panel up and you can insert your question, and we will be able to see that information and pass that on to any particular panelist you've heard today, or we can put it on Chris to answer for you.
Thanks, Chris Hill. Appreciate that. We're about 73% voted so far. We'll give it more time while others take a little bit of a break.
While this question remains on, I'm just going to answer a question from Maureen Hunter. She's asking about how will credit be applied for wings. I know some of you who joined today's webinar were certainly interested in the wings credit. Our understanding is we provide the data analytics and participation information that is available for the user of this webinar. And we send that to the FAA, and they do a validation process to determine if you were present and attentive during the webinar and participating. So once that information is provided and you have this email that you registered for this webinar is the same one that you have registered under your WINGS program with the FAA safety team, I understand that is the methodology they will use to determine if credit can be issued. I know there's a few FAA folks on the line, so feel free to chime in on a chat or a question, comment to clarify anything that I got wrong there.
Thanks, Chris, for mentioning that. I apologize. I should have mentioned that at the beginning of the webinar. But yeah, definitely good to be able to get some of that wings credit, and certainly Maureen, by asking a question, we can validate your participation for sure. So we're at 77% voted, Chris. Why don't we go ahead and close that? It doesn't look like any more coming in, and we'll share that result. Okay, 54% yes, 46% no. So very almost evenly split, but better on the positive side of doing some type of simulator or flight training device. Again, having been able to use simulators and flight training devices for myself, they are invaluable. They truly can help you, especially for those that are flying IFR. That ability to scan gauges consistently and help keep that habit pattern consistent is important. But for everybody else as well, that they can be very valuable. So encourage you to seek out those options. They can be very affordable, and they're becoming more prevalent. So that's good news. Okay, why don't we go ahead and transition to our next speaker, Lee Roskop with the FAA. He's going to be talking about some data that he works very hard at collecting and analyzing and distributing as it relates to the rotorcraft industry and the accidents that take place. So Lee, why don't you go for it?
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. So there will be two pieces to this helicopter accident data update. For those of you who receive our FAA's monthly accident briefing that is posted on HAI's website as well, you'll recognize some of the front end slides. One of the differences that will be apparent pretty quickly, though, is the typical monthly presentation I give is structured in terms of fiscal year, and the USHST's data we do that by calendar year. So that will be one of the differences. And then the second part of this presentation, since today's webinar has an instructional training focus, sort of tried to dig into some of the instructional training data so that you could get a better perspective on those particular areas. So to start out with, just a reminder on what our USHST goal is. We're looking to reduce the US's 5-year average fatal accident rate to 0.55 per 100,000 flight hours by 2025. It's a 5-year goal. We just started the goal, kicked it off in January of 2020. So we're only 13% into our 5-year goal timeframe that will end in December of 2024. Now, the baseline that we're using for measurement on that is the 5-year time period from 2014 to 2018, where the baseline rate was 0.62 per 100,000 flight hours. So by the time we reach our goal, that will amount to an 11% reduction to get us to 0.55 per 100,000 flight hours. And to give you an idea of what that looks like in terms of raw numbers, 17 fatal accidents per year is the maximum number that we would be able to have in order to still meet that goal, assuming that the flight hours remain constant. And over about the last 15 years or so, our U.S. rotorcraft flight hours have been fairly constant. They tend to range from between 3.1 and 3.2 million flight hours per year. This last year, they were a little bit less than that. In some years, we've had a few 100,000 hours more than that. But over the average, that's where it tends to be. The source of the flight hours that you'll see for the rates calculated here are from the FAA's General Aviation and Part 135 Activity Survey. It's used for all the years 2019 and prior. There's about a 1-year survey work. So the 2019 data will be completely formalized here in the next month or so. So there's about, again, a 1-year lag. 2020's data will not be out until late 2021. So that's how that works. And now, so for 2020, in order to get rate calculations for that, we use the FAA's 20-year aerospace forecast. They release that annually in March of every year. Of course, this year we had a little bit different variable with that, with COVID happening in March, and with the shutdowns, slowdowns, and various things that happened with that, we had to make some kind of adjustment. And I'd be lying to you if I didn't tell you that around June timeframe, I was kind of nervous on what we were going to do for flight hours this year. But thankfully, through FlightAware, which had a good idea on the flight activity that was going on out there in the general aviation sector, to include rotorcraft, they worked with Gamma and through also the General Aviation Joint Steering Committee, and figured out that we saw about a 16% reduction in the flight activity in March, 29% in April, and 7% in May. By June, we were back to at or above pre-COVID levels. And talking to some of the folks that have been around for a while, they said that that is not uncommon for the rotorcraft industry to bounce back to some degree faster than other aspects of GA. So that gives you an idea on how some of these rates were calculated. So this is our 5-year average fatal accident rate. One slide too far there, sorry. At any rate, so this is our 5-year average fatal accident rate. For some reason, it keeps advancing. Not sure why. But what that slide shows you is that basically we had a pretty significant reduction in that 5-year fatal accident rate for the early 2000s. And then you see the slope of the line get shallower. And then unfortunately, over the last 2 5-year periods, we've actually seen that tick up slightly in the 15 to 19 time frame, and then for 2016 to 2020, it's gone up a bit more. So, I mean, even though the progress wasn't moving along quite at the rate that we would hope that it could for starting about 2005 through about 2018, we were inching towards progress, but the last couple of years have not been good ones for the fatal accident rate, and as those way into that 5-year average, we're seeing that uptick. Now this next slide just is the same kind of metrics. Where on the far left side of the chart, you see what our baseline rate is of 0.62 per 100,000 flight hours, and then on the far right side of the chart, what our goal is of 0.55 per 100,000 flight hours. So for the 5 years in progress right now, just like you saw on the previous slide, we're at 0.71 per 100,000 flight hours. For our current year, at least for the 8 months ending in August, we're at a rate of 0.88 per 100,000 flight hours. So obviously that's not where we want to be. And for August, we were at 1.5 per 100,000 flight hours. So just as a point of reference, obviously we're looking for that 0.62 as the baseline, and we want to be 0.55 or lower here in a little less than 4.5 years. But whenever we see that rate inching towards 1 per 100,000 flight hours, that really sets off a whole different set of alarms for us. That was where the GA, JSC drew their baseline goal rate a few years ago. So they achieved that. So we don't, obviously we want to get to the 0.55, but we definitely don't want to see this thing climbing up into that 1 per 100,000 flight hour range. This just takes those rates and shows you what it looks like in terms of counts as we have gone throughout our current calendar year. You can see where things really started to steepen in terms of the line from June through August. As a matter of fact, those particular months were some of the worst that we've seen in recent history, and even dating back to 1983, which is where we have our data on record so far. So you can see that we need to have a couple months with basically 0 accidents to re-intercept this line for 2014 through 2018, and we will have to basically finish the year with no accidents if we're looking to stay at that 17 or under. That will help us achieve that 0.55 per 100,000 flight hour rate. This just gives you an idea, since we used the 5-year average. This gives you the single year fatal accident rates that we've seen in the U.S. And to give a reason on why we in the USHST changed to a 5-year average instead of just a single year is you can see some of the volatility in the year-to-year data, and that tends to smooth out as you use a 5-year period instead of just a single year period. But the frustration here is on the far right side of the chart, where you can see from 2018 through 2020, we've had basically 3 years of stagnancy there, where we had hit a pretty good groove here from 2014 through 2016, saw a slight uptick in 2017, and then things just started to devolve in 2018, and now 2020 unfortunately is the third part in the trilogy, and it looks no different than the first two. Now, looking at the single year fatality rates, as you'd expect, this largely mirrors what the fatal accident rate plot looks like. So that I'm not completely doom and gloom in this first part of the presentation, I will point out the tiny sliver of silver lining is this this fatal or fatality rate could actually be worse if not for the fact that some of our fatal accidents were single occupant fatalities. So had those had additional crew or passengers on board, you'd see this line that would be either straight or even a steeper slope there. So again, that's not great news. It doesn't doesn't make this any better in terms of all the loss of life is tragic, but just telling you that it could actually be worse than what it appears on the chart had there been more occupants in the rotorcraft. Now, this is our accident rate, and remember that the USHST is focused on reducing the 5-year average fatal accident rate, but just for some context on what's going on with that world, as we've explained in some of our previous the presentations on the subject, it's the accident rate and the fatal accident rate do not positively correlate with each other year in and year out. It's some years they'll be married up where there is a positive correlation. Sometimes there's a negative correlation. So one is not necessarily tied to the other. But you can see in terms of the year so far in 2020, we're at 3.44 per 100,000 flight hours, which were that to continue to the end of the calendar year, it would be right there as our best year over the last 20 calendar years. Our previous best was 3.48 back in 2016. So again, I know all of us would like to see this line with a more of a steeper decline as well, but at least so far this year, that is good news. And as you can imagine, we have got a really bad ratio this year in terms of our number of fatal accidents to our number of accidents. Historically, that number has run at 16 to 17% annually. This year, we're north of 25%. So in other words, 25% plus of our accidents this year have had a fatality on board. So just in summary for the first part of the presentation, our 5-year trend is troubling just from the standpoint that right now we're trending at 15% increase above that 0.62 baseline from 2014 to 2018 that I discussed, and our 5-year goal is an 11% decrease from the baseline. From an industry standpoint, we seem to be mired in a bit of a 3-year funk. We saw that the rate really has not improved since 2018, and so those annual rates, frustratingly, are comparable or worse to what we observed about 15 years ago. Summer is one that, from a fatal accident standpoint, I think we'd all just like to turn the page on and get on with better things, because we had 11 fatal accidents, basically averaging 1 per week. During the summer, from the beginning of June to the end of August. That was our highest since 2010, and it tied for our worst 3-month June, July, August since 1983. And we had 4 more fatal accidents in July, August for the first time since 2008, and only the 4th time since 1983. Now, as sort of depressing as this slide is, I will say that with our helicopter safety enhancement efforts, a lot of those are now getting to the stage where, early on we had a lot of, team formation, a lot of analysis, a lot of organizing data, a lot of trying to get things put together. Well, those things are largely wrapping up, as you heard from some of the previous presentation. And now we're getting into more of the outreach and promotion stage. So I think our hope is, from the USHST standpoint, is that if we can get more permeation of these products out there into the industry, that some of the efforts that we've been working quite hard on for the last 3 or 4 years can help make a dent in making those rates make a turn towards declining instead of being stagnant. So switching gears a little bit and drilling down specifically into the instructional training industry, I thought one of the things to start out with would just be to give an idea of how many hours from a percentage standpoint the instructional training community accounts for in terms of our annual rotorcraft flight activity. So this pie chart shows you that we basically have 3 industry sectors that account for over 50% of our flight hours each year. The aerial observation sector, which includes law enforcement and also electronic news gathering, is at the top there at 18%, but you can see instructional training is not far behind, and then right after that is air ambulance. So you look at that chunk, the chunk for each one of those 3 to include instructional training, and they are more than double what these other categories are that fall into this second tier, and far outdistance some that you see over here in the upper left-hand corner of the pie chart. So bottom line, there's a ton of instructional training activity that is going on out there from an exposure standpoint. Now, if we look at what the fatal accidents are in terms of a percentage for 2009 through 2018 for instructional training, you can see in terms of the, I guess you could say the high offender categories, instructional training over that 10-year period has not been there. We'll see these very high numbers in terms of personal private, about half that percentage for air ambulance, and then in this 9 and 10% range for the other categories. Well, instructional training is at 7%. So for the amount of flight hours that are going on out there for that industry, thankfully, the fatal accident percentage is on the lower end. Not saying that it couldn't be better, and not saying we cannot always continue to improve and drive that down, but that is positive for the amount of flight that's going on. So you can imagine when you take those 2 elements, the flight hours and the fatal accidents, and we put it into this kind of chart where you see what the fatal accident rate is per 100,000 flight hours over the last decade. Instructional training falls among the best ones that have been observed out there over the last 10 years at 0.28 per 100,000 flight hours. You can get an idea, since our USHST 5-year goal is a rate of 0.55 per 100,000 flight hours or less for that 5-year average. All these industries that are at helicopter, air ambulance, and below, those are the ones that are already there. So if we can get some of the ones that are on the top to be closer to these rates, we will be able to make that. But basically, these industries on the bottom are the ones that are already helping us to be at a lower fatal accident rate. Now, this gives you an idea how the difference for instructional training compares for accidents versus fatal accidents. So as long as I've been doing these kind of numbers, which is over 11 years now, I can mark these industry categories on the right side of the pie chart in stone. Every single year, it's been these 3: personal, private, instructional training, and aerial application. Usually the only question in my mind is who's going to be number 1 for that particular year, because there might be some jockeying around where maybe aerial application is 3rd for one particular year, but it's 1st for the next year, and so forth. With instructional training, it'll slide from 2 to 3 or from 3 to 1, but always those 3 categories account for about 55% of our total accidents every year. So with that in mind, if we apply the flight hours to that to get a rate, you see instructional training moves up from where it was with the fatal accident rate near the best numbers to more the middle tier that you see in here for the chart. Nowhere near some of the ones that are at the top. Again, given the massive amount of flight hours that are flown in the industry, but still more of a mid-tier performer than our top-tier performers that are here with the lower accident rates. Now, from the USHST's specific analysis work, consistent with one of the pie charts you saw earlier in the presentation, instructional training accounted for 7% of the 194 fatal accidents that we reviewed. We reviewed those in 2 separate 5-year buckets, one from 2009 through 2013, and then a second bucket from 2014 through 2018. And something interesting is you sort of divide up the 2 5-year periods here. For the first part, 2009 to 2013, see 5% of the fatal accidents analyzed by the USHST were instructional training. So, lower than what that overall 10-year percentage is. It was the 7th highest industry category. And 2 of those 5 fatal accidents fell into the USHST's top 3 occurrence categories. And just as a reminder on what those are, it's loss control in flight, unintended flight into IMC, and low altitude operations where the rotorcraft hit an obstacle. So 2 out of those 5 fatal accidents fell into those top 3 occurrence categories. Both of them were loss of control in flight. Now, for the second 5-year period, you can see the percentage of fatal accidents represented by instructional training in that actually increased to 11%. And it jumped up to the 4th highest industry category. And there were 5 of those 10 fatal accidents that were in the USHST's top 3 occurrence categories, 4 of them in the loss of control in flight, and then 1 that fell in the low altitude operations where it struck an object. I thought something else that may be of interest to the group would be the NTSB's data that they have on instructional training fatal accidents as related to how they assigned finding codes. Now, multiple finding codes are usually assigned by the NTSB to any accident or fatal accident, and those finding codes basically have these big bucket categories, things like aircraft, personnel, environmental conditions, and then they drill down to subsequent levels of detail, and it goes about 10 digits deep in this numerical code that they assign to these accidents. And each one of the finding codes can be flagged in one of 3 different ways. It can either be flagged as a cause, it can be flagged as a factor, or it can be just flagged as present in neither a factor nor a cause in the accident. So what I looked at was for the time period of 2009 to 2018, for those instructional training fatal accidents, there were finding codes that were available for 14 of the 15 events. The reason it wasn't 15 of 15 is there was not a final report issued on that 15th fatal accident, so there were no finding codes that were assigned to it yet. So across those 14 events, there were 57 finding codes assigned. And remember, there can be multiple finding codes assigned per accident, so that's the reason why you see such a large number there. Now, the most frequently used finding codes that were observed in those instructional training fatal accidents for rotorcraft, number 1 was aircraft control, and that was cited in 5 fatal accidents. Incorrect action performance was in 4 fatal accidents, and then maintaining rotor parameters was also in 4 of those 14 fatal accidents where the finding codes were assigned. Now, the finding codes that were most frequently cited as a cause were aircraft control and then maintaining the main rotor parameters, and they were in the same quantities that they appeared in terms of just being assigned in general. Now, if we look at overall accidents and not just fatal rotorcraft accidents, there were finding codes that were available for 235 of the 245 instructional training accidents that occurred in that 10-year time frame. 656 finding codes were assigned in those cases. And the most frequently used codes, we can see some overlap in the fatal accidents, as well as an area that was not present in the fatal accidents. So aircraft control and maintaining main rotor parameters, those we remember from the previous slide. But the one that was different was delayed action, and that was cited in 59 of the total accidents. And likewise for the finding codes most frequently cited as a cause, You see aircraft control represented as well as maintaining main rotor parameters. Delayed action was there as well, and again cited as cause in 51 of the 59 cases where it was used. So to give just a snapshot of 2020 and what we've observed so far in this year, we've had 2 of our 17 fatal accidents that have been instructional training so far in this calendar year. So it's 12% higher than historical. Remember, our historical number is about 7%. Although that 12%, you'll remember, is consistent with what we observed from the 2014 through 2018 timeframe. So one of the things I think that we need to be keeping our eye on is, are we seeing a consistent uptick in the percentage of instructional training fatal accidents? Because we saw it in that most recent 5-year period of 14 to 18, and it appears that we're seeing that somewhat borne out in this current year as well. Now, 6 out of 68 overall accidents were involved instructional training, so that's lower. So I mentioned how year in and year out, for the last 11 years, I've seen instructional training in the top 3 for the accident categories. Well, it's making a liar out of me this year, because it's 8% instead of that 16 to 22% that I usually see for that. Now, for the rates that we have calculated for January through August of 2020, the assumption is that instructional training this year is accounting for the same historical average of 17% of the flight hours that it has traditionally over the last many years, 10 plus years. So with that in mind, the fatal accident rate this year for instructional training would be 0.6 per 100,000 flight hours. You can see that's a rise from where it was for that 10-year number I showed you earlier from 2009 to 2018. It was 0.28 per 100,000 flight hours. The overall accident rate is lower, 1.79 per 100,000 flight hours, compared to where it had been in the previous 10 years at 4.6 per 100,000 flight hours. This just gives you an idea, if you weren't already aware, of the 2 instructional training fatal accidents that we've had in 2020. The first being the Schweitzer 269, and then in June, the Enstrom 280. So that concludes the comments that I had prepared for the data and the analysis that we've done, not only for the overall fatal accidents, but also specific to instructional training. There's more of this information that's posted at ushst.org, and then also, as I mentioned, HAI publishes the FAA's monthly rotorcraft briefing on their website as well, if you wanted to look at some of the historical data and how that compares year over year to some of the things that I talked about today. Just again, keep in mind that those briefings are organized by fiscal year, so you will see some differences in the numbers. So that concludes my comments, unless there's any questions.
Thanks, Lee. Great job as always. I'm amazed at your analytical skills and data collection capabilities. I really appreciate everything you do, and certainly, the importance of communicating this kind of information. We couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much for doing that. As some questions come in, I did have a couple for you, Lee. When you were looking at the specific instructional training events that occurred, and looking at those factors that have been identified in the reports, did it talk about what type of evolution or what type of skill was being trained at the time that the event occurred? The aircraft control or the delay in reaction did it talk about, like, as an example, were they doing typically practicing auto rotations when those events occurred?
So this is one where there's a difference between the accidents and the fatal accidents, Chris, on how that shakes out. The auto rotations tend to be something where we see the accidents occur. It might be a harder than planned landing, that sort of thing, or maybe the instructor comes on the controls. later than they had wanted to, and so the student lets the maneuver go beyond their capabilities. The instructor can't intervene in time. So those are the sort of things that we see with the accidents. With the fatal accidents, it can be all over the map on those, for loss control for unknown reasons, to loss control due to performance management type issues, loss control due to exceeding the flight prescribed flight envelope for the rotorcraft. And then one of the ones that we had on there was the low altitude operation, where it led to fatal accident. Well, those wires are the big deal on that. The wire strikes are the ones where they're the bulk of our low altitude operation strikes. So what happens, of course, if it hits the wire, aircraft can assume this really funky attitude, crash in that same attitude, and kind of all bets are off from that standpoint on the survivability piece of it. So there is variability from report to report, but those are some of the themes that I think we've seen. I think you may be still muted, Chris.
I was, thank you. But thanks for that. One of the questions that came in related to, and you talked about, the volume of operations, at the beginning of COVID, and then today. The question was related to, do you think the rate would increase as crews get back into flying post-COVID because of currency or recency of experience? I don't know if in the last couple months have we seen or heard anything about folks, kind of shaking out the cobwebs, so to speak, and unfortunately something near miss or some type of minor incident occurring.
So one of the comments that I'd have on that is it's been brought up in multiple forums that where I've either just been an observer or been asked to speak at. I remember at HAI's safety meeting, with their working group, it was brought up there in the spring. In fact, I think recently HAI just did a webinar on that, the currency and proficiency aspect, after potentially taking time out for COVID. So I think it's that concern is there. Whether we have, I haven't seen it quantified yet in terms of how prevalent it is, in terms of, hey, this person not flown in the last 60 days, and then they went out there and they the aircraft was involved in either an accident or a fatal accident. Too soon to say, probably for 2020, since none of those reports, especially for the summer, are anywhere close to final yet. But it's a great question because I think that's been on all our minds, because we know that there's certain aspects of our helicopter operations where it's perishable skills. Rust is a real thing. So I do think it has to be on the forefront. Whoever asked that, it's a great question. I think you're muted again.
Yeah, I kept clicking, it wasn't happening. I don't know. Maybe playing with my cursor, tricking me. Anyway, you're right. It's a great point. I think Cody Bogart had asked that question, so thank you, Cody. And certainly for those operators, but even at the personal private level, for sure, if you're not flying as often, there's certainly it's certainly worth doing something to shake out the cobwebs, so to speak, to review your the different maneuvers that you're going to be performing. And a great environment to get back into is maybe do a flight with a CFI to double check your proficiency before you go out and do something more extensive on your own. There was another comment that came in from our friends down in Ecuador, from Julio, and I apologize, Julio, I won't even try to pronounce your last name. But Julio talks about training auto rotations and have accidents in training in engine out emergency. That's somewhat very unlikely to be present, but they do. Sounds like they're doing some training to prepare themselves for that event, during an auto or conducting autos or perhaps the engine out. But certainly that is necessary part of any curriculum is to be practicing or preparing for those engine out emergencies. I don't know if Terry is still on the line, Terry Palmer. When we talk about simulators, in the new technology with simulators, the fidelity of simulators, what's available now for practicing an auto rotation in a simulator or an engine out procedure in a simulator? How realistic is that now becoming for folks?
Practicing auto rotations is not as it depends on what kind of simulator they have. They're not doing too many of those. Engine out or any kind of normal emergency procedure in the aircraft, they'll do some of it, but as far as the actual final landing of it is depends on the simulator. They can start the procedure, whether or not they complete the procedure. You need to do that in the aircraft, but in the sim, sometimes.
Yeah, no, it's tough, right? I remember trying to do practice autos in a simulator way back long ago when I was in the Navy, and the fidelity just wasn't there yet. But certainly you can maintain your in-R control. That's always a good proficiency
Yes.
tool. But nonetheless, certainly trying to do things to help in those situations is important. But Lee, thanks again. Great job with the information. I know keeping track of that's not easy, but nonetheless, it's important to help us get a really, really good sight picture on where we are as an industry and the accidents that are occurring, as well as the fatalities as well. And certainly helps U.S. helicopter safety team and all of the industry to steer our focus on how to reduce those. So thanks again, appreciate that. I don't see any other questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't see any other questions right now. So let's do another polling question if we can. Does your operation effectively manage risks? Yes, no, or could be better. So let's give about a minute to collect that info. We're about 60%, 59% coming in. We'll wait a little bit longer. We're coming up on 70% of the audience participating. We'll keep it going. No, I think it's holding steady, Chris. Why don't we go ahead and close that out and share that information. All right, we've got 54% of the audience saying yes, 2% saying no, and 44% could be better. So again, it's kind of almost an even split, but thankfully it's more on the positive side. But to the point, I think it helps address is that we know that we could do a better job with most things in our lives, especially in our operations. So that element of continuous improvement that we know about from safety management systems is important. And so I think the question helps show that there's enough, with 44% saying could be better, there's opportunity for improvement. And so as I encourage you all, the folks that are on the call, to work with your organizations. Perhaps some of you are safety managers or safety officers, directors of safety, and if not, it's okay, because everyone in the organization plays an important role of assuring that risk management practices are being conducted, and the identification of the hazards, the risks involved, and then most importantly, what controls and mitigations are being put into place so that those negative outcomes, those unwanted outcomes, don't occur. Okay, well, let's transition to the next section. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the industry tools that are out there that are available for folks that can be, in some cases, these are free, and encouraging, again, to help make risk management a little bit easier, especially when we talk about pre-flight risk assessments, like Dave mentioned earlier in their helicopter safety enhancement, not just for flight training, although we know that's important, but for any type of operation. And so we're going to start off with the first one. I'm going to take that one, and it looks like Chris, you've got the slide keyed up, so thanks if you would go ahead and advance that for me. This particular application is available from Leonardo Helicopters. It's called the Skyflight Mobile Service, and within that, they have a flight risk assessment tool built in, among other features that they have included. But the risk assessment component to that application that you can download from the iOS store or Android, depending on what type of a mobile device that you have, the flight risk assessment is free. And again, for the Leonardo aircraft that you may be flying, you can download it. And what this tool and the next couple that we're going to be showing you talk about, they were able to adapt some of the FAA standards and from EASA and the European Helicopter Safety Team created essentially a risk assessment checklist, a pre-flight risk assessment checklist, and so they adapted that. Essentially, it was a spreadsheet to these mobile apps, to technology, to make it a lot easier for folks to utilize. So, some great opportunity for y'all to use. If you advance the next slide. At least with the Leonardo version, you're able to pick a kind of a mission set type of checklist, whether that's related to training, carrying passengers, lots of different options available for you. And so for those that are familiar with a pre-flight risk assessment tool, it helps you, start to, again, address situational awareness for the given flight that you're about to go on, to try and help identify potential risks beyond what perhaps you've already identified through your mission profiles and so forth, system analysis component of your SMS. But again, looking at weather, fatigue, maybe something related to the aircraft equipment being broken or not available. Again, the idea is to answer questions and perhaps and hopefully insert some mitigations related to questions that you've answered that might have a higher level risk. So some great tools, methodologies for this particular one. Next slide. It does allow to pick the selection from the current options or current risk assessment checklist, but also go back and look at some of your historical ones as well. Next slide. And then it does allow you to customize and do create some custom checklists for you as well. But again, I encourage you to check it out. Again, this is just one option for you. So thankfully, there's some other ones. And we're going to go ahead and transition over to our next mobile application. This is brought to you by Airbus Helicopters. Oh, nope, we've got that's fine. We'll do the next gen flight training with Christian Mueller and their tools, and then Alexandra Mogg will come back to the Airbus. Christian, are you online? I think you're on mute.
Yep. Can you see me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Good. All right. Well, first of all, thanks for giving me the opportunity to present this tool. I'm also on the European Helicopter Safety Team, and to be honest, I'm amazed what you guys are doing. It's just really mind-boggling. To be honest, it's great. We have a long way to go. So what I want to present to you tonight is safety tools. Actually, it came from the States. I met a guy named Brian Smith at a HAI webinar, at a seminar, and it really struck me, and it was really good. So I really liked that idea, and I talked to him and said, how about if we take that over and do an app with it? So basically, the two of us collaborated on the first version of that tool. Now, how can I move forward on the slide?
Chris can move it forward. There you go.
All right, good. So basically, what we try to do is, in Switzerland, we have the opportunity to get money from the Swiss FAA if we have projects that are safety related. And I thought this is a great idea. So I convinced them to give us money to actually work on this and actually work on it for a few iterations and make updates over a couple of years. So this application was possible this way. Now, there's only one condition associated with that, that one part of the app has to be accessible for free. And basically what you have is now we have an app that has a few functions that are very useful to the people that actually are using it right now. And we're still able to actually expand on that. So what we try to do is to have a framework independent of the OEMs, because there's some people who just want to have like a third-party solution that does not fall into the big categories. Now we receive an annual support for this application to keep it up to date of about $10,000 per year, and that lasts up until 2023. What we plan to do for 2021 is a technology change, so we will have a progressive web app. A progressive web app is basically a web browser that actually can store the data and all the functionalities, so you actually think it is an app, but it's actually a web browser. So this will make this tool independent from any kind of app store or application. You can use it anywhere you have an internet connection. Next slide, please. So, Chris, great. So basically we have 4 elements in it. We have a FRAT tool, and what we wanted to do is actually give the companies, the operators, the opportunity to actually individualize their own frats. So basically, what we can do is we can actually open up a company, we can inscribe your pilots into that and any number of pilots, you develop the frats, and so basically you're good to go. So you use this framework and you use your own risk analysis tools, because you might have a different operation that does not fit in this kind of general frats that we currently have on the app. Then we have any kind of checklists. If you want to have a special checklist for a pre-flight that you would like it to implement, we can do that too. For now, we have the generic checklist for 2244, HS350, the most important types. We have one thing that we use in Switzerland that's a bit specific in Europe. Basically, when you do aerial work and you have a task specialist, that's the person that's actually riding with you from a third country, from a third party. If you have like a power company employee riding with you on an aerial work mission, basically you give him a briefing and he's able to sign that with his finger to actually confirm that he has received the briefing. So aerial work operators in Switzerland find that really useful because they have to prove that they've given the briefing. And then obviously at the last point, you can actually send out a safety briefing, which is really easy to do. There's a number of fields that are pre-filled based on the location of your device, and basically just can dictate into your phone. And it should be a typical safety report should take about 2 minutes to fill in max, and you shoot it off to your safety manager, and he can start with the analysis and get back to you with more details. The idea behind that was to actually get a first report in and encourage people to report as much as possible. We are talking about the events that actually do not lead to an occurrence or an accident, but also just an event that the people receive to be dangerous in the current situation. So we want to capture these events as well. Next slide, please. So basically, it's available, it's free, and these core functions will stay free. We haven't really thought about commercializing it yet. We would like to share it with as many people and companies as possible. We are constantly actually onboarding companies that would like to have their own frats, their own checklists, and because it is paid for by the Swiss state, they don't have any costs and their benefits are quite significant. Next slide, please. So when you look at the back end, it's actually quite simple. When you choose basically the frats that you like for your company, those are the standard frats that we already have in there, and then you adapt them to your specific requirements, or you use the fret as they are. Now, what we do is we have, once the fret is set up, it gives you a score, but then also it offers you mitigating measures. So we want to make sure that the pilots also have some options available, how to reduce their risk score. And then these options, they actually take with them, so they actually maintain the risk mitigation measures during the flight. There's a fret typically for each mission before, during, and after the mission. So if the pilot wants to actually see if the conditions have changed in flight, they actually can do another fret in flight and then actually get sensitive on the latest changes, and also give them options if they would like to see something more. Next slide, please. So this is what you can see here. So we have, you know, the answers. We have typically 3 different answers, different points, and mitigating measures. Now, what would be obviously fantastic if we can actually expand the frets that are in the tool and make them available based on best practice. So I think it's if we have the common knowledge out there, people who are willing to participate and share their knowledge in specific missions on what to look out for, we can expand this tool quite quickly to you know, a tool that incorporates many different missions. Now, also with these checklists, we can copy them and say, okay, this is now a, you know, I don't know, San Juan helicopter checklist, and we change it to that. And all the employees that are working in San Juan helicopters, they will actually go on the app, switch to their San Juan role, and then they will see only the checklists that are actually relevant to their operation. Next slide, please. So we have checklists. So you can, as you can see, we can develop checklists quite easily. It's actually quite fast to do something like that. So I mean, this device you always have with you, and it's great because you can use it. You can switch to the checklist that you need that are from your company, and it's always there. We use this for preparation in aerial work operations, for HESLO operations. So actually task specialists that prepare the operation have a checklist, so they know what material is important, what kind of points are important to check before they actually get the helicopter on site and start working. And I think this has helped the industry significantly, just to make sure that the younger guys who come in don't forget anything, and if you have a check, you're sure that you don't forget anything. All right. And the occurrence reporting part is something that people really like, because so far they did not really want to report that much, because it used to be a big hassle with paperwork. But if you have an app that you can fill in about 1 or 2 minutes, then actually they're willing to do that. And if once it's in the system, we can work with it. And I think that's really important. And the safety managers from the company actually, they get the reports, and they also get these situations where nothing has happened, but they might actually start to collect these events, and then maybe there's a pattern there. So what they do with the data is up to the safety manager. That's where we want to encourage them to do a bit more. Next slide, please. So where we actually want to go is, you know, we want to have this data and then actually enrich it. There's quite a number of data sources available that we can use, and the idea is that if people, you know, and safety managers that actually receive these reports, if they are willing to share them, we can anonymize them and categorize them, and then they can be made available to other safety managers in other systems. So if you think about like Lee Roscopp's accident database, that could be a connection, and I think it would be really helpful to have this alignment and then connect the data and make it more meaningful. So this is where we want to go with this system. it's open, and basically it's there to increase safety. What we want to do, again, it's open for everyone. And if we can get industry know-how into the tool, it will be very helpful. And then we are able to also expand on functionalities that are more useful for everyone involved. This has been the motto of what we have been doing. We want to reduce complexity and focus on the things that are really important. And that's basically what Safety Tool is all about. And that's basically what we want to do also in the future. Thanks.
Thanks, Christian. That was great. Appreciate the fact that you and Brian Smith got together, two great minds, of course, to make this happen. And thank you so much. This is an incredible tool that, a great resource. So clearly, we've identified some opportunities. I think you work with Dave Desura on the flight training side, Joe Browning, Terry Palmer, a lot of great collaboration to continue to help refine the tool. So I appreciate that. So folks know, when you go into the, at least on the iOS store, make sure you put in Safety Tools to search for that app to download it, is what I found to look at it. There was a question that came in, Christian, for you. How do you make sure the checklists that you have currently integrated in the application are updated or look at latest issues?
Yes, basically, we work with the operators, and so the operators tell us what the latest checklist is. So they actually tell us the updates. What we can obviously do is to actually incorporate these changes, and then actually it's available for everyone immediately, basically. If you have a company checklist, well, then the company basically is responsible for the content to make sure that it is up to date, and we'll just incorporate all the changes.
Okay, that's great. I also like the fact that you mentioned for while in flight, right? With the conditions change in flight, that pilots are able to utilize the checklist to either update their current one or even create a new one, and that's important. I think that's an element that traditionally gets left out, because we refer to this as a pre-flight risk assessment tool and don't really look at applying the same situational awareness concepts, the risk factors that you're identifying when things change, how you're going to update your risk assessment as it relates to the remainder of the flight. So that's great that you incorporated that.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, if you're in flight, sometimes if things change that you're not expecting, you get a higher stress level. So you might forget some things. And what we wanted to do is just to say, okay, look at these are the most important things. How do you evaluate them? Okay, this is what you can do, basically. And also after the flight, if the pilot is willing to rethink of what has happened, he's able to learn and make a better assessment next time.
Sure, yeah. The post-flight debrief or the post-flight review is as critical as the pre-flight, because that's where your lessons learned can be documented and you can be addressed and for the future. So thanks again, Christian. We're gonna transition to the next application, and certainly if any other questions come in related to the app, we'll let you know. But thanks again. Next up, from Airbus Helicopters, Alexandra Mogg is going to talk about what Airbus can provide as well to the industry. And one point I wanted to make sure I brought up that Alexander had mentioned that I missed earlier, that Airbus has published a safety information notice as it relates to change management during this COVID pandemic, how things that you can do to address the changes you're experiencing. So I appreciate that mentioning, and so make sure everyone checks that out. And then I know, Wayne, you had mentioned going back to the situation and about managers are being stressed and extreme workloads for them as well during this challenging time. So it's really, really hard to balance what's going on in operations as it relates to what current operations they need to do, as well as with the COVID environment. So definitely change management is critical. So I know we're running short on time, but not to limit your presentation, Alexandra, I want to turn it over to you and let you continue.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. So I'm Alexandre Mauger. I work in the aviation safety team in Airbus helicopters. And I'd like to present you what we are doing for operational safety. Aviation safety is for us a very important part of our activity, and it is something that we really want to support our customers on. But beyond our customers, also the whole rotorcraft community. As a consequence of that, we've been working on a series of operational aviation safety tools. So, for example, the H135 ground rescue booklet e-learning, which is available in 9 languages and provides sets of safety recommendations for firefighters, medical crew, and passengers, which you can use for passenger briefings. We are also developing other aircraft for that. And also in support of operational aviation safety, we have developed before your flight, the pre-flight risk assessment app, which is the app I'm going to tell you about. And in fact, for us, this is just a brick in a more complete flight loop with flight preparation going down to flight debriefing. And therefore, for us, we are also working on a HFDM tool, Flight Analyzer. And the goal ultimately is to integrate all those bricks together to offer you a complete solution, going from flight preparation to ultimately flight debriefing and lessons sharing. Our pre-flight risk assessment app, Before Your Flight, is available on iOS and Android. It's available in 9 languages, so Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Portuguese, Spanish, French, German, obviously English. And also the goal is to promote a lot of existing safety articles published by a number of safety work groups, such as a member of the IHST, the Skybrary, and other items coming from there. So when you start the app, you will be offered the possibility to select a number of different mission types. There is also at the bottom right links section, which is a kind of a safety library where you will be able to search for various topics and get selected articles from renowned work groups, once again, such as ESPNR, Flight Safety Foundation, and so on, so that you can get all the latest that is being published. When you select one of the mission types, you will be asked for a number of data, registration number, so that you can track the flight easier later. Organization, this is if you're recording your flights as part of an organization and that your SMS manager can, through the back office that is provided, access your pre-flight risk evaluation. But you can also do it as a freelancer or standalone pilot and keep this evaluation for your own records. You will be asked a number of questions. Those questions are all based on the work of the EHEST work, so the European Helicopter Safety Team. We have adapted it somewhat, and each time you will be given a number of choices which will evaluate the risk exposure you're facing in the coming flight. Every time there will be, as much as possible, a learn me more, tell me more section where we will, when relevant, provide some articles that can give you some background information of why we are asking this and what can be the effects on you, and provide some background information. This is to, as much as possible, support the younger part of the community to get all these existing knowledge when they want to find it. The goal is not just to do risk assessment, it's also to provide actual tools to try to mitigate them. So it's not just to give a go or no-go decision, it's also to provide some supporting elements to try to lower this risk evaluation and take actions to limit the risk exposure. So every time a mitigation will be described, you can decide to opt in and take it or not. And obviously, then you would have to implement it. And at the end, you're given the overall evaluation, trying to make it visible what are the outstanding parts that would need attention from you, and the mitigations that you have taken in as part of this evaluation, and the overall level that is then assumed for the flight. Obviously, the data that is shared is not available for Airbus helicopters. It's only it's fully GDPR compliant with the European regulation. So only the pilot and his SMS manager would have access to it. And as I said, there is an integration loop for the SMS manager that is available. This tool is not as customizable as others. And here the assumption is that for us, larger operators have already developed their own tools and their own solution. And part of our goal was to really support smaller operators or operators in areas where pre-flight risk assessment is not really part of their habits. And for that reason, we have tried to translate it in as many languages as possible to really support the communities in areas where this is not part of the overall industry discussion at the moment. Coming back to what you were explaining earlier for IAMC, I would like also to point out that our training facilities have developed an IAMC course that is available in the US. And you were talking also earlier about the HSE 116 for transition training. And I would like to point out that we just published a pre-flight check, pilot pre-flight check video for the A-Star H125 that is available for free on the Airbus Helicopters website. The app that we just mentioned is also obviously for free. You can find a lot of the safety promotion content that we are publishing and the e-learnings and the media that we are developing on the Airbus Helicopters website. As I said, we are developing some ground rescue booklets that are used to train your firefighters, onboard crews for how to behave in and around an aircraft or in terms of emergency. We will be releasing this year H145, H125, and H130, again in 9 languages. And next year, we aim to develop additional e-learnings on aerodynamic factors and hoisting to reflect the work that has been done in the ESPNR team on hoisting operations. If you have any questions regarding all of this, you can contact us at the email address displayed here, and we will gladly answer any and all the questions you might have on this app or the e-learnings mentioned here.
Awesome, Alexander. Thank you so much for that presentation. Thank you so much for Airbus Helicopters for being able to provide the tools and the training and the simulators for industry to enhance safety. I know it's a lot of work for you all and certainly other OEMs, so definitely worthwhile. And of course, encourage everybody still participating in the presentation to take a look at that application, to download it on your device and see how you might benefit from that. I really like the background questions that you all incorporate, the background information that you incorporate for each of the questions. I think that's a great help for people that may not sure what the purpose of a risk factor question might be. So that's very beneficial. And also to your point about the importance related to mitigation as it relates to answering the different risk factor questions, because that is truly an important element of the process. So thank you for that. If there are any questions, I haven't seen anything come in quite yet. Again, if you're searching for these tools, go into your iOS or Android device, into the respective application store or app store, and search within that to download on your device. I don't see any other questions. I know we've gone past our time by 6 minutes, so our apologies, but certainly the information is relevant and important for you all, so we want to make sure that we provided that. For Nick and Wayne, I don't know if you wanted to have any closing remarks on behalf of this, but for everyone that's online, that concludes it. And Nick and Wayne, anything you'd like to pass on?
I would just like to say thank you to you, Chris, and also Chris Hill, for making sure this ran without hitch. I think it was a superb 2 hours. We held over 130 people until top of the hour. Remember, we're going to do another one of these on the 18th of November. So those people who are still with us, I thank you for your time, and hopefully you'll find a lot of this stuff useful. Please spread the word and volunteer where those emails have been put up. Let's try and get more people on board and more people involved. That's all I have. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Nick. So not much else I can say after that, except what an amazing presentation. I'd like to certainly thank Chris and everybody at HAI for hosting this and doing such a great job. This business of these webinars has come so far so fast that I continue to be amazed by it. And I certainly enjoyed it and learned a lot today. So thank you for everybody who showed up, and we look forward to seeing you guys in a couple months for the next one.
Yeah, thanks, Nick and Wayne, and thanks to everybody else out there. I certainly didn't do this on my own, so thanks to all the help from HAI and their great team, and obviously Chris Hill. And thank you to all the presenters today. Again, great information. I know you all are working hard, and appreciate everything that you're doing there. For all of you that are still on, this audio video will be put on the HAI YouTube channel, so make sure you check that out if you want to refer back to any of it. And then also we've got the handouts that are already loaded into the GoToWebinar in your panel, control panel. If you go down towards the bottom, you'll see them, or they'll be posted up on the USHST website. So I don't have anything else. Chris Hill, you got anything in the background?
No, sir. Great job.
Okay. Thanks so much, everybody. Glad you could participate. Look forward to seeing you again on November 18th. Thanks.